It was an alien egg taken from inside a facehugger. Its growth process was brutally cruel, for it fed solely on human flesh. Scientists placed it within a piece of lung tissue for incubation. Days later, it hatched into a strange creature. At first glance, it resembled a snake, but upon closer inspection, its extraterrestrial features began to emerge. Now it looked almost like a small pet, gentle, even docile. But once it matured, no one would be able to control it. Wendy was a robotic girl. She used sonic mimicry to reproduce the creature's calls. Through this method, Wendy gradually learned its language. After only a few exchanges, a peculiar bond formed between them, a bridge of communication spanning two species. Yet the nightmare in the lab was far from over. Next came the test of the eye creature. It was locked inside a cage along with a helpless sheep. Don't be deceived by its tiny body. It may lack a brain, but its intelligence was extraordinary. It studied its prey carefully, then attacked at the perfect moment. Seconds later, the sheep's eyes had been replaced by its own. From the outside, almost nothing had changed, but the real sheep was already dead. Now the eyes themselves had become the brain controlling the body. At first, the newborn organism moved awkwardly, but soon it learned to walk on 4 legs. On the monitor, a strange waveform began to appear. No one could say for sure what remained inside the cage. Would you want a pet like that? To be continued. This woman could control the alien.
Fuck is that?
She emitted a strange sound, and the monster behaved like Annie's loyal pet, obeying her every command without hesitation. The CEO of Genesis Corporation could hardly believe what he was seeing. He could feel that Annie was gradually losing control. Then Annie walked in, seeing the bodies of her teammates. She immediately understood. The company had clearly hidden many things from them. She no longer wanted to stay there. So she hacked into the Genesis system and released the imprisoned alien. Once the alien was free, the massacre began. Annie and the others quickly escaped the company, but didn't realize the alien was quietly following them, protecting them. Soon they encountered a squad of soldiers. Annie warned them to leave, but the soldiers didn't listen. So Annie ordered the alien to be released. In less than a minute, all the soldiers were easily killed. Then she commanded the monster to hide, and it obediently complied. Her brother Tom was terrified of the monster, but Annie saw it as a trustworthy friend. Standing amidst a pile of corpses, Tom was emotionally confused. Would you want a pet like this? Please, brother, this is just too cool. To be continued. The horned beast roars in rage. Bullets hit its hide. It only gets angrier. It swings its massive tail. The hunter's thrown through the air. Hard, the monster charges again, too fast to dodge. Jenny spins the Gatling gun around. A storm of bullets tears through the air, forcing the creature to turn. But the ammo's gone. Click, empty. The beast lets out a piercing roar, breathing harder, heavier, angrier. Alice grabs a rocket launcher, fires without hesitation. The blast shakes the ground, but the creature keeps coming. Not a single scratch, only rage. It slams forward. Alice dives into the truck. Too late. The beast rams it. Metal twists. The whole vehicle flips. Smoke fills the air. Alice crawls out from the wreckage. The monster's already on her. She freezes. Then, a shout. The hunter bursts from the dust, leaps onto the creature's head, drives his bone blade deep into its skull. The beast thrashes, screaming, throwing him off. But that moment is all Alice needs. She locks onto the wound, runs full speed, fires her wrist arrow, launching herself onto the monster's head. It roars, twisting wildly. Too late. Alice grabs the blade and drives it down hard. To be continued.
Oh my God!
The soldiers see the horned beast open its jaws. They know danger's here. Every bomb goes in. A blinding explosion follows. Flames rise high, shaking the sky itself. But when the smoke clears, the beast still stands. Barely a scratch. Its thick hide blocked it all. Jenny fires back, shouting orders, signaling retreat. The creature roars again, charging straight at them. Then a flash. A bounty hunter appears out of nowhere. He fires an arrow tipped with explosives. It hits the beast. No real damage, but enough to stop the charge. Jenny leads the team into a cave. The monster can't fit inside. It howls in fury, then turns away, disappearing into the desert. Everyone thinks it's over, but the real nightmare's just begun. From the darkness behind them comes a sharp, screeching cry. A massive spider bursts out of the shadows. The sniper reacts fast, aims, fires, a clean hit to the eye. The spider screams, stumbles back. They rush to pull Jenny to safety. Then one soldier looks up and freezes. From deep inside the cave, more spiders are coming. To be continued. Would you accept a $100,000 check to be an alien warden for a day? This job is super simple. All you have to do is feed the aliens. Safety is not an issue. The facility uses reinforced special glass. As long as you don't make a mistake, your life is guaranteed to be safe. Even though these creatures come from outer space, their diet is easy to manage. For example, the eyeball monster parasitizes sheep, so feeding sheep is as simple as feeding the eyeball monsters. Next, there's a creature that looks like it eats plants, but surprisingly, it is actually a carnivore. After Jack greets it, he turns to another alien creature. This creature feeds on metal, and he prepares some metal ores for it. But unfortunately, the hatch seems to be broken. Jack applied too much force, and the door fell off. With no other choice, Jack doesn't want these creatures to starve, so he decides to manually feed them. He inputs the code and opens the door to the chamber. The eyeball monster stares at him silently, looking like it's plotting something evil. Jack carefully carries the tray into the room, glancing at the quiet bird's nest. Maybe these creatures are resting. He wedges the door with his foot, planning to leave after placing the food. Just as he slowly crouches down, the eyeball monster suddenly bumps into the glass, causing Jack to fall. But when he gets up and prepares to leave, he realizes that the door is locked. To be continued. The alien is about to enjoy its food, but it didn't expect someone to ambush it from behind. The alien falls down in pain. Then Jack takes out a flamethrower and seals the alien. But he doesn't know that this will be a wrong decision. Meanwhile, Tom's squad discovers 2 soldiers have tragically died. To their surprise, the bugs are still greedily sucking their blood. On the nearby dissection table lies the dissected body of an embracer. As they examine it, they suddenly hear a faint licking sound from the corner. A black cat is licking the bloodstains on the floor. The cat suddenly turns its head, revealing another strange eye. Everyone is startled. The next moment, the swollen eyeball explodes. Suddenly, a creature resembling an octopus appears, its form like seafood sashimi. It shoots out tentacles like Spider-Man, aiming directly at a female teammate's eyes. Fortunately, the hybrid's enhanced reflexes save her. This sashimi-like creature rushes toward her with strong intent to attack. As the woman swings her arm, the monster is thrown onto a metal table. Another teammate quickly traps it in a metal container. Want to see more stories? To be continued. A panda is repeatedly hit by a car, and it's the same person doing it. This man and his family enjoy torturing animals. His wife stuffs a llama's head into the trunk and repeatedly slams the hood on it. His father brings a horse into the house and keeps smashing the horse's head with a door. Not even the lion escapes. They treat it without mercy. The grandmother isn't afraid at all, striking the lion's head with all her might. The animals continue to struggle in pain, and all of this is eventually discovered by an animal protection organization, so they decide to intervene and bring justice. A radical activist bursts into their home, wearing a pair of big boots, ready to teach this family a lesson. He starts moving to the beat, then stuffs the wife's head into the trunk, repeatedly slamming the hood onto her. Next, he sets the car on fire, constantly smashing that man's head. The father, scared, quickly locks the door, but the activist kicks down the wall and slams the door into the father's head. He then crouches beside the sofa, and not even the grandmother is spared. The whole family finally understands and swears never to harm animals again. The animal protection organization takes all the animals away, then leaves wearing their big boots. Want to see more stories? To be continued. The lab was filled with facehuggers everywhere. However, the 3 of them seemed to have not noticed that they had already walked into the midst of them. Their first step was to lower the room temperature until it matched their own body temperature, so the creatures wouldn't sense their heat signatures. They moved quietly, controlling their nerves. Only by staying calm could they avoid making noise and control their body temperature. Everything seemed to be going smoothly. Alice almost screamed, but her teammate caught her in time. The facehuggers stirred up her fear. The creatures sensed the change, but did not immediately attack them. They were only a few steps from the target when Jack's phone suddenly rang. His sister's voice was frantic. She was being chased by an alien creature. The news shocked Jack. Sweat ran down his face, and his body temperature quickly rose. The facehuggers immediately sensed him and began crawling out from various places. Andy didn't waste any time. He immediately ordered a retreat. Swarming facehuggers chased closely behind them. Jack grabbed a cold flare and threw it, buying them a few extra seconds. However, Andy suddenly slammed the door controls shut, sealing the exit. That woman was just feeding the alien, but she underestimated the intelligence of the alien. Just a few minutes ago, the moment she opened the container, the alien had already memorized everything completely. As the lid slowly loosened, the administrator was still completely unaware. Nearby, the eyeball creatures saw everything. To avoid the administrator's detection, it began tapping on the glass of its room, drawing her attention. The administrator got distracted. The alien seized the opportunity to escape quietly. It climbed onto the woman's cup and laid countless eggs inside the cup. The poor woman didn't notice at all. Her alertness was nearly gone. Brothers, this is truly incredible. When the alien climbed down from the cup, it crawled into a piece of bread, ready to ambush the human guard. Fortunately, a male doctor who had just entered noticed the anomaly. The administrator was confused. She clearly remembered the jar being sealed. How did it get out? Neither of them believed that the alien had the intelligence to open the jar, so she simply resealed the jar and left. That was her biggest mistake. At that moment, the captain called for a meeting. The administrator hastily grabbed her cup to leave. The clever eyeball creature saw the opportunity to escape. After a few minor jolts, it shattered the glass and easily slid out. Who can explain why such a dangerous creature would be kept in a jar? This is too easy. It's downright foolish. To be continued. This is the largest banana in the world. Honestly, everyone, I've never seen a banana this big. After Jack got off work and went home, he planned to eat a banana. Just as he reached out to grab one, the banana suddenly split into two pieces. He thought he might be too tired and hadn't seen clearly, but just as he was about to deal with it, the banana actually turned into two bunches. Jack quickly rubbed his eyes. To his surprise, the banana changed again, this time into 4 bunches. At this point, Jack was completely confused. He hurriedly grabbed his phone and called the doctor, but just then his phone turned into a banana. At this point, he realized he might be experiencing a serious hallucination. He decided to drink some water to calm down, but when he put the glass down, the bananas on the table suddenly piled up into a huge heap. He frantically turned on the faucet, splashing cold water on his face. To his astonishment, the pile of bananas on the table grew abnormally large. Confused, Jack walked to the balcony. Then he noticed the cars driving down the street had all turned into banana cars. Fortunately, when he returned inside, the bananas on the table had returned to their normal size. He quickly sat down and examined the banana closely. Everything seemed normal now. He finally breathed a sigh of relief and was about to eat it. However, the next moment, he suddenly heard the sound of glass shattering. It turned out Jack had been deep in his hallucination the whole time. The banana he had been holding was actually a light bulb. Brothers, I can't even imagine how painful this would be. To be continued. The woman stared in horror at the monster before her. It had the head of a bull and the body of a man. In an instant, the monster teleported behind her husband. Then the monster mockingly winked at her and took her husband away. The woman was frozen in fear. She hurriedly locked the car doors. Just then she received a call from her mother. But the voice on the other end was that of the monster. At that moment, the woman completely broke down. After a while, she decided to try calling the police. But again, it was the monster's voice. Lisa quickly hung up in terror and decided to try another method. If calling didn't work, she would try texting. Her message was quickly responded to. After exhausting all her options, she completely broke down and began crying uncontrollably. She felt so foolish. Why hadn't she just driven away immediately? Just then a car passed by. The woman saw a glimmer of hope. She quickly got out of the car to chase it, shouting loudly for help. However, as she ran, the car didn't stop. To avoid being noticed by the monster, she quickly turned and ran back to the car, only to find her dead husband back in the car, with an eerie smile on his face. Want to see more exciting stories? Please click on my homepage. Trust me, brother, you won't regret it. In a quiet restaurant, a demon from hell suddenly appeared. It drifted among the tables as if searching for a suitable target. Strangely, the other diners kept chatting, completely unaware of the terrifying presence. Only Thomas seemed uneasy. He secretly watched the demon's movements, fearing it might notice him. After circling the restaurant once, the demon's gaze suddenly fixed on Thomas's girlfriend. At that critical moment, Thomas feigned calm and blew her a playful kiss, cleverly prompting her to move away from the demon's sight. For the moment, she was safe, but the demon seemed to sense something unusual. It glided closer to Thomas, trying to confirm whether he could truly see it. Thomas's heartbeat quickened, yet he forced himself to remain composed, carefully concealing his yin-yang eyes, a spiritual gift allowing him to see beings from the underworld. This creature fed on the fear and agony of humans at the moment of death. If it discovered someone who could perceive it, it would stop at nothing to orchestrate their demise. Fortunately, Thomas knew how to hide his perception. Even so, the stench of death lingered thickly in the air. As his girlfriend stepped away from her seat, the demon followed closely behind, growing restless. It raised its claws, ready to mark her as its prey, when suddenly, a man in a suit entered the restaurant. He carried with him a heavy aura of death. Instantly, the demon turned its attention toward him. Thomas understood what this meant. Wherever such a spirit appeared, disaster was never far behind. The man in the suit harbored a deep and malevolent intent, and the dark energy radiating from him began to draw in other demons. They gathered around him as if summoned by an unseen call. Thomas had never witnessed so many infernal spirits at once. It could only mean one thing. The town was on the verge of a great catastrophe. The woman no longer shed tears. Instead, what flowed from her eyes were bowls of steaming, fragrant noodles. It all began when she was fired by her boss and lost her job. She went home and cried in sorrow. Unexpectedly, her tears turned into strands of noodles. She quickly filled a bowl and served it to her mother to taste. After finishing, her mother exclaimed in amazement, "This is delicious." A light flashed in the woman's mind. She had an idea. She set up a small stall and began selling these tear noodles. At first, only a few customers were willing to try them, but once they did, everyone found them extraordinarily tasty. The woman's heart was filled with happiness. After selling out all her noodles, she went back to the stairwell and cried several more times, producing another batch of noodles, then took them back to her stall to sell again. Her customers multiplied, and business thrived. Eventually, she couldn't help but laugh. But then came the problem. She found she could no longer cry. Even when watching the most touching movies, not a single tear would fall. To keep making noodles, she took her dog to the countryside. There, in deep anguish, she let her dog go. On her way home, she finally cried again. She quickly collected her tears and made them into noodles. She continued selling them at her stall. Her business grew even more prosperous. Customers loved her noodles. Word spread, and investors came seeking collaboration. Together, they opened a large 300-square-meter restaurant. The investors handled the guests, while the woman focused solely on making noodles in the kitchen. But a new trouble arose. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't cry anymore. Even thoughts of her dog brought no tears. At last, she had no other choice. She made her mother disappear. At that moment, she cried again, and once more, noodles flowed from her eyes. To be continued. Everything the man touched instantly turned into Lego bricks. When he drank coffee, his cup suddenly became a Lego mug. He picked up a French fry to eat, but the fry transformed into a tiny Lego rod. Terrified, he spat it out. He slammed his hand on the table with a loud bang. The entire table turned into Lego bricks. The man was completely stunned. To test this strange ability, he walked over to his friend and gently tapped the chair his friend was sitting on. The chair immediately transformed into Lego bricks, and his friend fell to the ground. The man was both shocked and thrilled. He ran out into the street, wanting to seize the chance to take revenge on his boss. He touched his boss's BMW, and in the next second, the entire car turned into Lego bricks. While he and his friend were celebrating the victory, he instinctively raised his hand for a high five, but the moment their palms met, his friend also turned into a pile of Lego bricks. Panicking, he desperately tried to reassemble his friend, but no matter how hard he tried, it didn't work. In despair, he decided to cover up the truth. Finally, he carefully arranged the pile of Lego friend pieces and put them up for sale on TikTok, priced at only $20. To be continued. This person has no face, because he hangs his face on the wall. Every morning after waking up, he follows the rope to find a pile of masks. Then he chooses one that matches his mood. He feels that today might be a good day, so he picks a smiling face. After putting on the mask, he goes out to the supermarket. When he reaches the checkout counter, the cashier looks at him with hostility. He feels uncomfortable. As he walks down the street, everyone stares at him with hostile eyes. Some even try to provoke him on purpose. The smile on his face gradually fades. When he arrives at the office, his boss harshly criticizes him for being late. He quietly begins to work, but a colleague angrily throws a pen at him. Despite being treated this way, the man chooses to remain silent and endure. He wants to have a cup of coffee, but another colleague pushes him aside. The man doesn't care about his own feelings anymore. Unwillingly, he returns to his seat. He tries to draw a smiling face to cheer himself up, but halfway through it turns into a frown. Finally, the workday ends. He accidentally bumps into a passerby, but this time he doesn't apologize. Instead, he stares at the person. When he gets home, he closes the door and walks to the mirror. Then he hangs the sad expression from his face onto the wall. However, the number of sad faces on the wall keeps increasing. Now, only the last smiling face remains. There will be more stories to come. To be continued. Alice suddenly felt a creature crawling across her skin before she could react. Stumbling into the kitchen, she yanked open a drawer and grabbed a pair of long forceps. Forcing her jaw open, she shoved the tool deep into her throat. People on the beach suddenly noticed that the seawater had retreated hundreds of meters in an instant. It was clearly an ominous sign. The next second they saw an enormous tsunami surging toward the city, but what they didn't yet realize was that the tsunami carried with it tens of thousands of zombies. Where did these creatures come from? Months earlier, on a small island, a vial of biochemical reagent had accidentally leaked. Toxic white mist spread rapidly across the area. Tens of thousands of laboratory workers were forced to flee. Once infected, a person would transform into a zombie within minutes. Panic spread as they rushed toward the helicopters, desperate to escape with their employer. But the boss had already made his decision to abandon everyone. Clutching the experimental results, he boarded a private aircraft, put on a gas mask, and ordered the pilot to take off immediately. The helicopter lifted off at full speed. Some of the workers clung desperately to the landing skids, trying to escape with it. But as the aircraft shook in the turbulence, those who lost their grip were thrown off into the clouds below. Then the boss opened a sealed case. Ignoring the terrified pleas of his employees, he dropped a vial of the red virus. The exposed workers mutated almost instantly, plummeting from the sky as monsters. In the end, the boss escaped alone, leaving tens of thousands of infected behind on the island. No one expected that those zombies would eventually be carried by the tsunami all the way to the mainland. When two fishermen later noticed the sea filled with corpses, they tried to call the authorities, but when they turned around, they were horrified to see a massive wave of zombies rising behind them. The true catastrophe had only just begun. To be continued. When the Soviet Union first entered space, they unexpectedly captured a mysterious extraterrestrial being. To study it, scientist Lisa made a bold and unprecedented move. She slowly lay down in front of the alien. Everyone watching was utterly stunned. Unexpectedly, the alien mimicked her movements. However, when Lisa stood up, she accidentally touched a weevil. That immediately caught the alien's attention. Seeing it display a level of intelligence similar to that of humans, Lisa decided to attempt close contact, taking every precaution for safety. The captain helped her into a specially designed protective suit, and she carefully entered the room, placing a toy on the floor. When the alien saw the toy, it was clearly intrigued. It gently stroked the toy with its body. Seeing the alien's curiosity, Lisa prepared to take the next step, but she accidentally slipped. In that instant, the alien became violently enraged and dragged Lisa away. At the critical moment, the captain urgently ordered the activation of the high-intensity lights, forcing the alien to retreat with powerful beams. In the end, they managed to rescue Lisa. However, something far more terrifying was quietly beginning to unfold. To be continued. This guy sweats 10 tons every day. Every time he gets on a bus in less than a second, the entire vehicle floods with his sweat. Seeing the cabin completely soaked, the bus driver has no choice but to put him on the blacklist. He's never allowed on the bus again. Helpless, he decides to switch to taking taxis. But when the taxi driver sees him, he immediately cranks the air conditioner to full power just to try to prevent a disaster. When he gets home, the guy wants to relax and grill some fish. But as soon as he approaches the stove, a torrent of sweat gushes out, instantly putting out the fire, and even reviving the fish. He's left with no choice but to order takeout instead. However, when the delivery man arrives, he's utterly horrified, because inside the guy's home, dozens of fans are running non-stop. If he ever steps away from them, his sweat just keeps pouring out. The delivery man is completely dumbfounded on the spot. To make things worse, the company janitor has just finished mopping the floor. When the guy walks into the office, he leaves a trail of water everywhere he goes. He has no idea how much trouble he's causing. One day, after fixing a client's computer, a coworker walks in. The guy feels unbearably hot, and in that instant, a surge of sweat bursts out, completely destroying the client's machine. The client has no choice but to buy a new one. Do you want to know why he keeps sweating endlessly? To be continued. Blind John accidentally fell into a trap, only to find himself locked inside a wooden box. Suddenly, a female assassin descended from above and without hesitation drove her wooden sword into the box. Within seconds, the sword pierced through multiple parts of the box, striking precisely at John's weak points. The assassin sneered coldly, confirming that John was dead and prepared to leave. However, to her astonishment, John miraculously regained consciousness. Calmly, he asked if she happened to have another wooden sword. The assassin looked puzzled, turned around and prepared to strike again. Unexpectedly, John suddenly burst out from the box. The assassin reacted swiftly, kicking toward John's abdomen, intending to disable him, but she had no idea that was actually the strongest part of John's body. As a result, not only was John unharmed, he accidentally broke the assassin's leg, leaving her in agony. With no other choice, John carried her back to his dwelling, intending to treat her wound. Even so, the assassin still harbored suspicion and hostility, believing John had ulterior motives toward her beauty. She had no idea that John was in fact blind and harbored no such intentions. What happens next is even more thrilling. To be continued. The rookie barber accidentally shaved off the general's favorite braid. As he was cutting the hair, the three of them were stunned. Jack hurriedly picked up the fallen braid and quickly threw it away, but in the process, he accidentally broke the shop's door. However, things quickly became more complicated. What to do without the braid? Jack had an idea. He decided to gather hair from both sides of the general's head and stretch it, extending it by 10 centimeters. Although it looked somewhat close, it still felt a little off. In desperation, Jack had no other choice but to pull with all his strength using both his hands and feet. Each tug made the general's face wrinkle deeper. After a fierce struggle, the braid was finally tied. In the mirror, it seemed to have no obvious flaws. The general also seemed satisfied. Even so, Jack still felt something was missing. Just then, Lucy rushed into the shop holding a plastic bag which contained fresh dog poop. Without hesitation, Jack placed the dog poop on the general's head. The general's face showed a satisfied smile. However, the barber's fate was not so fortunate. They couldn't help but vomit in disgust. The story only gets more exciting from here. To be continued. The scientists carefully used lasers to cut the man's helmet. When the helmet was removed, they were shocked to discover a terrifying creature tightly attached to the man's face, so they began attempting to remove it. The scientists tried to cut its antennae, but just as the pliers were about to grab it, the creature's tail suddenly wrapped around the man's neck, seemingly threatening them to stop, so they decided to remove the man's protective suit first. But the situation soon became more complicated. One of the creature's tentacles pierced into the man's body. Although not immediately fatal, it caused him to feel numb and exhausted. At the same time, it continuously supplied him with oxygen. The scientist realized that this creature seemed to be protecting him. The captain decided to take more forceful measures, trying to remove the creature. However, when they cut with the laser, a yellow liquid sprayed out and unexpectedly splashed, immediately corroding the metal. The captain, seeing this, quickly checked the ship's cabin and found that the chambers on 2 decks had been completely corroded away. Fortunately, the corrosion stopped at the 3rd deck. It was then that they realized the creature's threat was far greater than they had imagined. Just when they thought everything was over, the creature on the man's face suddenly fell off and he seemed to return to normal. To be continued. A severe acid rain suddenly struck. Anyone who was caught in the rain quickly saw their skin begin to rot. Even the most sturdy bridges could not withstand the corrosion of the acid rain. At this time, the streets were filled with people fleeing for their lives. A woman in the chaos of running accidentally fell into the water due to being pushed by the crowd. Her hair was instantly corroded, leaving her bald. The excruciating pain forced her to desperately swim towards the shore. But with such intense corrosion, she quickly passed out and sank to the bottom of the river. On the shore, her daughter wanted to help, but the distance was too far, so she could only scream out for her mother, watching her being swept away by the corrosive rain. Just the day before, news outlets had frequently reported incidents of acid rain injuring people across the country and reminded the public to stay home as much as possible, avoiding going outside. However, many people thought such a disaster was far from them. That day, while Jack was working, he suddenly noticed several small holes on the factory's roof. The water collected in the holes emitted a strong corrosive odor. Realizing the severity of the situation, Jack quickly called his wife, asking her to drive over and pick him up so they could go to the racetrack to pick up their daughter who was in training. However, on their way to pick up their daughter, they found that the road ahead had been blocked by police and the sky not far off had darkened, approaching at an alarming speed. Seeing this, Jack immediately floored the accelerator, weaving through the nearby fields. Meanwhile, his daughter was still in the forest, riding her horse with friends, completely unaware that danger was rapidly approaching. In the depths of the desert, there is a girl and a white guard who protect a magical well. The water in this well possesses incredible power, capable of bringing the dead back to life. However, anyone who wishes to drink from the well must pay a price. 3 brothers accidentally discovered this well, but the white-clad girl stopped them from taking the water. No matter how much they begged, she refused, and told them that their mother was destined not to recover. She warned them that violating the rules would result in punishment. In the end, the girl accidentally fell into the well. Despite heeding the witch's warning, Genie decided to take the spring water and leave. But his brother advised him to reconsider. However, Genie had already made up his mind. Thus, the 3 brothers took the water home and gave it to their mother. Soon, the wounds on their mother began to heal. Watching this, they happily helped their mother to her feet. Genie also showed a relieved smile. However, when the mother learned that the spring water was not a gift but had been forcibly taken, her expression turned cold. She hurriedly told her sons to pack their things, preparing to leave immediately. But it was already too late. A puddle of water suddenly appeared on the floor. To be continued. The man's hands began to grow wildly. Even his feet grew to a size 57. His entire body started to sprout thick hair. Then his spine began to slowly protrude. The pain caused him to crouch on the ground, unable to endure the transformation of his body. As time passed, curled hair grew all over him, and sharp fangs gradually appeared. Next, strange changes began to occur. His facial features suddenly tilted forward, and his face became extremely distorted. In less than half an hour, he had completely transformed into a beast. Before all this happened, Jack was an ordinary man. Jack had a friend named Harry. The 2 of them decided to take a trip to the countryside. During their vacation, on the road, local farmers kindly warned them, telling them not to wander carelessly in the wilderness. However, Jack and Harry were very bold, determined to go to those dangerous places. The sky soon darkened, and they found a small tavern to rest for a moment. Harry noticed a pattern hanging on the tavern wall. He suddenly remembered that this pattern had appeared in a movie before, seemingly representing a werewolf. Out of curiosity, Harry wanted to ask the people in the tavern about the meaning of the pattern. However, unexpectedly, the atmosphere in the tavern instantly became extremely heavy. They began to feel uneasy, wondering if they had said something wrong. The tension in the air grew, and even one person directly told them to leave. To be continued. Under the creature's control, a stainless steel glove weighing 10 tons was easily cut open, but no one expected its true purpose. In reality, it was meant to save the most dangerous criminal in the universe. Now, this criminal is imprisoned in the most secure prison on the moon. Today happens to be his 50th birthday. A mysterious woman arrived at the prison with a cake, claiming to simply celebrate his birthday. To ensure the cake was safe, a guard immediately reached his hand inside. However, the next second, a strange monster suddenly sprang out of the cake, killing 2 guards on the spot. Moments later, the creature successfully freed the imprisoned man. These individuals quickly obtained weapons and with just one bullet pierced through a 10-meter thick steel wall, forcefully escaping the prison. However, this commotion soon alerted the entire prison. Faced with a Russian guard's encirclement, the man remained calm. He aimed his gun at the ceiling and fired a shot. Then, using his tentacles, he grasped the ground, unleashing tremendous suction, directly pulling all the guards into space. The woman was shocked, begging him to save her, but he simply calmly let go of her hand. As he flew out from the moon's surface, his long-repressed roar finally erupted. This man, imprisoned for 500 years, had finally regained his freedom. Curious how he was locked up. To be continued. A janitor discovered a fancy high heel next to a trash bin. She was about to pick it up when she suddenly noticed something shocking. Hidden inside the trash bin was a body. The victim appeared to be African, which meant a foreigner had been killed in India. The police took the case very seriously and quickly cordoned off the area. After a detailed inspection, investigators found no signs of struggle on the body. Moreover, the expensive jewelry remained intact, indicating that this was not the first case of this kind. But what was even more shocking was the autopsy report. It turned out that the African woman was actually not a foreigner but an Indian. Someone had injected her with pigment, making her skin appear black, giving the illusion that she was African. Several years ago, a similar case occurred at a university in Mumbai. At that time, the victim's father, Jack, was the lead officer. When Jack delved into the old case, the suspect attacked him and injected him with the same pigment drug. Fortunately, other officers arrived in time and saved Jack's life. Despite this, Jack had never stopped seeking the truth since then, but the killer had always disappeared without a trace. Now Jack had a new case in hand. He arrived at the scene, carefully examined the surroundings, and found an important clue. Although there were surveillance cameras on the nearby streets, the only area without surveillance was where the trash bin was located, which happened to be in the blind spot of several cameras. Based on this discovery, Jack speculated that the killer was likely a resident living nearby. Back at the police station, Jack began visiting and interviewing the victim's family and friends one by one. From the victim's boyfriend, Jack learned that the day before the murder was the victim's birthday. The exploding cork hit the crystal chandelier. Then, a sharp decoration fell down. The glass quickly cracked, spreading like a spider's web, but the tourists were still immersed in the celebration, completely unaware that disaster was about to strike. Things began to worsen. The screws supporting the entire exhibition platform began to loosen. Suddenly, a woman felt an intense sense of unease. She stopped looking around as if she had sensed something. The next second, the glass beneath everyone's feet started to shatter. The tourists fell into a bottomless void. At the critical moment, someone desperately grabbed onto a glass shard. Lisa reached out to help, but all she could do was watch as he was dragged into the abyss. The surviving tourists were terrified by the sight before them, rushing frantically toward the emergency exit. However, a wall suddenly collapsed, instantly engulfing more people. Before they could react, there was no way out. Everyone was forced to run toward the elevator. At that moment, a wealthy man unhesitatingly shoved Lisa aside. Although the elevator was already full, he still prioritized his own survival. But due to the elevator's overload, the cable snapped. Before Lisa could react, the ceiling began to crack. The observation platform began tilting downward, and everyone slid down. As the piano fell, something even more terrifying happened. The man received a mysterious and strange mission. That was to hang landmines on the steep cliff every day. Not only that, but every 500 meters there was an emplacement cannon. Clearly, these weapons were meant to prevent something from climbing up. But this place was desolate, with no sign of anyone around. The only thing Jack could confirm was that this peculiar canyon had existed for a long time. His mission was to constantly monitor the situation from the 100-meter-high West Tower. The East Tower across from him was guarded by soldiers from another country. The soldiers from both countries not only had to complete their respective tasks, but they were also prohibited from any form of communication. At first, Jack could endure the loneliness until one day he secretly used binoculars to look across. What he saw immediately unsettled him. It turned out that across from him was a beautiful woman with a stunning figure. At that moment, the woman seemed to sense that someone was watching her and turned around to look, but Jack had already hidden. That night, Lucy's beautiful face kept lingering in Jack's mind. He couldn't help but look across again. Although she didn't respond in any way, she had planted the seed of love in Jack's heart. After enduring through the night, he didn't expect Lucy to take the initiative the next day. Due to the distance, Lucy could only write down what she wanted to say on paper. In response to Lucy's initiative, Jack replied in a way that adhered to the communication ban. He initially thought his straightforward nature would upset her, but to his surprise, Lucy said it was his birthday, and he could do whatever he wanted. Seeing Lucy's playful and cute demeanor, Jack could only wish her a happy birthday. And so, despite the vast distance between them, they continued to convey their feelings to each other in their unique way. And the distance between their hearts kept shrinking. From the moment he treated death as a pet, he developed a strange habit. Every time he left the house, he would place a piece of pencil lead on the door as a marker. but one day when he returned home, he found the pencil lead broken in half. At that moment, he immediately realized someone had definitely broken into his home. To avoid arousing suspicion, he said nothing. He simply sat at the table, pretending everything was normal. Even when death spoke to him, he dared not respond. Because in the neighboring apartment, a team of detectives was secretly monitoring his every move. If he communicated with death in any way, others might think he was talking to himself. His deductive reasoning was exceptionally strong. If he aroused suspicion, people might suspect he was communicating with a terrifying entity. Although Moon had realized he was being watched, his situation remained extremely dangerous. As long as Lel continued to surveil him, and no other deaths occurred during that time, it would be easy to deduce that he was Kira. Just as the police were about to clear him of suspicion, the news reported another accidental death. However, seeing Jesse studying with full concentration, the police had no choice but to temporarily set aside their doubts. But what they didn't know was that all of this was part of Jesse's strategy. He deliberately misled them, using a bag of potato chips as cover. He secretly hid a mobile phone inside, avoiding the blind spots in surveillance. Then he seized the opportunity to write down the criminal's name and silently orchestrated an accidental death. The moment the man touched the iron pipe, the pipe instantly melted. Before he could react, a 10-meter-high iron frame suddenly fell. This unexpected change threw the man into a state of panic. He wanted to seek help, but no one around dared to approach him. At that moment, several police cars quickly drove up and stopped in front of the man. The police raised their guns and aimed at him, ordering him to raise his hands above his head and place them on the nearby car. In order to save his life, the man had no choice but to comply. However, to his surprise, the moment his hand touched the car, both the police guns and the car melted. Seeing all the police officers on the ground, the man immediately began to run. He hid behind a box but was soon discovered by the police. Just then, a mysterious force appeared. It turned out to be agents from S.H.I.E.L.D. They were there to rescue the man. One of the agents placed a device on the ground, and then a flying capsule descended from the sky. The agents pushed the man into the flying capsule. Looking down at the city below, which appeared as small as ants, he was horrified. A few minutes later, he was safely brought aboard the spacecraft, and this spacecraft was the headquarters of S.H.I.E.L.D. The woman inserted her finger into the death prediction machine. The machine instantly spat out a card. On the card it said, "Old age." She let out a sigh of relief. But after only a few steps, an accident occurred. It was then she realized that old age didn't mean she'd live to be 100. It meant she would be killed by an old person. The second tester was an 18-year-old boy. When he saw the word on his card, his smile slowly faded. It said, "Hot girl." He sat on the beach feeling down. Just then, a sexy girl walked over and started talking to him. He began to suspect that this encounter might be the cause of his death. The girl asked him to help apply lotion to her body. As he looked at her figure, he swallowed unconsciously, but remembering the prediction, he held himself back. To stay safe, he chose to leave. But after only a few steps, the girl called out to him. He hesitated, then finally stopped. As soon as he turned around, sure enough, he was killed by the burning girl. The third person to take the test was an athlete. His card said, "Parachute failure." He was utterly confused because he was afraid of heights and never planned to skydive. He thought it was impossible to die that way. Just then, a giant parachute fell from the sky and landed directly on top of him. The fourth tester was an expert in archaeology. Her card read, "Time travel." She excitedly shared the news with her best friend. She thought she would travel to the ancient past and become a princess. Her friend thought she was talking nonsense and casually threw an alarm clock at her. It knocked her unconscious. When she woke up, a flash of green light appeared. She had really time traveled, but she didn't become a princess. She found herself in the middle of a battlefield.
Ready! Egg!
What you need to know about raising an alien first. The alien egg contains a creature called a facehugger. You need to be especially careful. Don't let it bite you, because rabies vaccines are very expensive. To avoid this situation, you need to place a tube on the alien egg. If the facehugger feels pressure, it will be sucked into the tube. Next, the shell of the alien egg is very tough. Even a chainsaw can only make a small opening, but the inner membrane inside the shell is soft. After peeling off the inner membrane, you will see the facehugger inside start to wriggle nervously. When scientists cut open the embryo with a scalpel, the facehugger will be born. Next, if you want to prevent the nervous facehugger from harming you, you need to immediately use a 10 billion volt stun gun to stun it. Then, carefully cut open its belly, because its blood is highly acidic. Finally, you can use tweezers to take out the small creature which resembles a tadpole. That is the true alien. To feed the alien, you need to use wild human flesh. Now the question is, where can you find an alien egg? Aliens usually come from space, so they build nests near spacecraft. You can use humans as bait to lure the aliens over. When it extends its inner jaw, quickly use a grappling hook to hook it. Some might ask, why do aliens look so weak? Frankly, if your third leg was injured, you might lose your ability to fight back as well. Then, you can drag the alien into the warehouse and shut the metal door to prevent its acidic blood from splashing onto you. When you open the metal door again, congratulations, you have successfully captured an alien. Now the alien egg is your prize. Now the question is, would you raise an alien? The zombie bride was targeted by the military, but she just wanted to find her wedding ring. She finally found the ring, but her finger was too thin and the ring slipped off again. The military was ready to open fire at any moment, but she kept bending over looking for the ring, trying to pick it up. The commander seemed to sense something. He ordered his men to stop firing and threw a steel nail at her, but she didn't attack anyone. Instead, she turned around and continued searching for the ring. At this point, the commander believed she was not dangerous, so he marked her wedding dress and prepared to retreat. However, when the zombie bride looked at the crowd, she suddenly lost control and began walking toward a bald soldier, chasing him relentlessly. Everyone thought she was terrifying, but all that was in her mind was her husband. On their wedding day, she got infected with the zombie virus. When they were escaping, her husband's leukemia suddenly relapsed. His nose began to bleed. Both of them were in a panic. The military mistakenly thought her husband was infected and immediately took him away. The woman begged them to spare her husband, but the soldiers took her husband away and shot him dead. Only after confirming that he was dead and wouldn't resurrect did they realize he wasn't a monster. But by then, the woman had lost her beloved forever. She looked at her dead husband completely hopeless. She remembered the scene of her husband's death, until she too was infected with the zombie virus. When she saw the bald soldier, she mistook him for her husband. Now the question is, do you think the soldiers were right to do this? Adam picked up the hose from the gas station. He began drinking water from it, but it wasn't gasoline, it was water. In this future world, water had become as precious as gasoline once was. Now water is very expensive. People have already started using sand instead of water to wash dishes. Life for the poor has become very difficult. They can't even afford a bottle of water. Adam's family is also very poor. They can only survive by eating tasteless mush. Every day, Adam and his son have to walk a long distance to make a living. Their job is to deliver necessities to workers. Unfortunately, after delivering the goods that day on their way home, their only donkey died on the road. Due to the lack of water, animals cannot survive in such hot weather. The donkey's death meant they no longer had a way to transport goods. So Adam and his son went to the city's auction market. They spent a lot of money buying an old mechanical donkey. As soon as they got the donkey, they rushed to the water station, not daring to waste any time. However, Adam was so thirsty he couldn't help but drink a large gulp of water. For that sip of water, he lost an entire day's earnings. When they returned home, Adam's daughter's new boyfriend, Tom, also came along. When Tom saw the new mechanical donkey, he asked to borrow it for a few days. However, Adam didn't like the boy, so he locked his daughter in her room and forbade Tom from speaking or seeing her. Adam also locked the doors and windows. Soon after, Adam discovered that the donkey was missing. He immediately thought of Tom, who had come to borrow it the day before. So he quickly suspected that Tom had stolen the donkey. Furious, Adam went to Tom's house, but Tom's father told him that Tom had gone up the mountain to deliver goods today and wasn't home. Adam didn't say anything. He turned around and left. He picked up his gun and walked toward the mountain. Now the question arises, what do you think Tom stole the donkey? The man reached his hand into a snake hole. He deliberately wanted the snake to bite his arm. When he pulled his arm out, a large snake tightly coiled around his arm. Then he peeled off the snake's skin and began eating the raw snake meat on the spot. His teammates were worried that he might get infected with parasites, but these concerns were actually unnecessary. Jack was already used to eating raw snake meat to make himself stronger. He often soaked live snakes in alcohol, then drank them down like water, so he was very familiar with snakes and their behavior. But this time his target was a giant python. It was said to be 30,000 feet long. Jack began executing his plan. He threw a fish into the river, intending to attract the python with the scent of blood. A few minutes later, a large snake swam up from the bottom of the water. The python violently twisted its body, shaking the entire boat. Jack gripped the winch tightly, slowly tightening the rope. The others didn't dare to come close to help. Suddenly, the thrashing python calmed down. Everyone thought it had escaped, but unexpectedly, the rope was suddenly pulled tight. The winch started shaking violently. It turned out that the python was still alive and had become completely enraged. It began to struggle violently, pulling Jack back and forth across the water's surface. Soon after, the water calmed down. Everyone thought Jack had been swallowed, but he suddenly emerged from the water, quickly climbed back onto the boat, grabbed a spear, and stared at the water's surface. When the python approached, he struck with all his might. The angry python lunged out of the water, coiling around Jack and the entire boat. Then it dragged them both into the water. The river surface returned to calm. The people on the big ship thought that Jack was definitely dead, but to everyone's shock, he actually returned alive to the big ship. No one knew how he had escaped from the python's mouth. At that moment, a hissing sound came from behind the crowd. Everyone was startled and immediately ran to hide. The python was searching the boat for the scent of humans. When it detected a hint of human smell, it immediately attacked, but it charged too aggressively. Its head got stuck in a barrel. After it freed itself, Jack used a rope to trap its head. Just when everyone thought they had succeeded, the python's tail accidentally knocked over a gasoline barrel. The boat caught fire. The flames ignited the explosives in the boat's cabin. The entire boat exploded immediately. Everyone had to jump off the boat to escape. The giant python was trapped on the boat and eventually burned to death in the fire. He put a long steel pipe into his mouth. The pipe was 50,000 meters long. Then he swallowed various metal parts. Afterward, he inserted a high-temperature blowtorch into his throat. In an instant, some parts inside his stomach began to melt and recombine. Under the watchful eyes of the audience, the man opened his mouth and slowly exhaled an object. No one could have imagined that it turned into a tricycle. The crowd stared at this scene in astonishment. But what happened next shocked them even more. As the host announced the next act, a werewolf suddenly appeared. Before anyone could react, it bit off the arm of an actress. Everyone thought she was in danger, but she walked to the center of the stage and quickly regenerated the bitten-off arm. Within seconds, her arm had grown back. The atmosphere in the venue became even more eerie. The final act began. A woman dressed in red chose an audience member. She gently stroked his face. Then something astonishing happened. A beard began to grow on her face. She basked in the applause of the audience, lowered her head, and looked at the boy. She sensed that this person was very dangerous. She immediately ended the performance. She hurriedly told the stage manager that they must evacuate immediately. Otherwise, the entire circus would be in danger. But the stage manager did not heed her advice. Instead, he instantly moved to the stage and released colorful poisonous spiders. Looking at the spiders on stage, Jack's eyes gleamed with excitement. After the performance ended, Jack secretly snuck backstage, hoping to observe the spiders up close. Just then, the manager happened to return to the room. To avoid being discovered, Jack quickly hid in the wardrobe. Through their conversation, Jack learned a huge secret. So the question is, do you think Jack will be discovered? What is this secret? Feel free to discuss it in the comments. The subsequent story will continue to be updated. The boy accidentally fell off a cliff, but fortunately, he was saved by an abandoned robot. From that moment on, the twist of fate began. The boy rescued the robot. To his surprise, the robot was not broken. It had a special ability, mimicry. This ability allowed it to not only imitate others' movements, but also store those movements. After cleaning the robot, the boy discovered its name was Adam. Excited, he took Adam to meet his father and asked for permission to let Adam participate in the Robot Combat Championship. However, his father refused the request. Adam was a first-generation robot, designed only to be a sparring partner. Although its defense was strong, its offensive capabilities were low, making it unsuitable for competition. Despite this, the boy firmly believed that Adam had great potential. To change his father's mind, Jack decided to take his son to personally experience a real robot combat tournament. When the match began, Adam performed as Jack had expected. Lacking experience, he was quickly surrounded by opponents, taking heavy blows. Jack thought Adam couldn't last long, but unexpectedly, Adam not only withstood the attacks, but also maintained a determined stance. At the end of the round, Adam's resilience won him the match, and made Jack reconsider Adam's potential. The angered opponent demanded a rematch, and this time, the boy had already adapted to the rhythm of the battle, able to predict the opponent's moves and even counterattack. In the end, they won the match and received the prize money. Through this match, Adam gained Jack's recognition, and Jack decided to personally teach Adam how to box. So the question is, do you think Adam can reach the peak? Feel free to leave your answer in the comments. Like, comment, and follow. More exciting updates about Adam will be available tomorrow. Two shockwave robots with hundreds of superpowers suddenly appeared. Even the so-called invincible Magneto was scared into retreating. If it weren't for Blink's help in opening a portal, he probably would have died on the spot. They are the Sentinels, known as the nemesis of superpowered heroes. These robots are equipped with built-in simulation systems. Not only can Sentinels mimic the abilities of mutants in battle, but they can also quickly analyze their opponents and create countermeasures to neutralize them. Even Iceman, who is considered an Omega-level mutant, was unable to stop them despite using Absolute Zero to freeze the entire battlefield. The Sentinel remained unfazed, immediately analyzing the situation, activating its sunspots, and then grabbing Iceman's neck to release heat, melting his head, and ending the battle with a single stomp. Against Human Torch's fiery encirclement, the Sentinel remained calm and composed, reversing the situation by using ice to counter fire. It transformed into an ice giant, resisting the fiery damage and advancing steadily, ultimately freezing Human Torch to death. As for Colossus, he was no match for the Sentinel. Colossus's strongest punches had no effect, and he was easily controlled by the Sentinel. The Sentinel quickly transformed into a harder metal than Colossus, delivered a powerful punch and knocked Colossus to the ground. Before he could react, the Sentinel smashed his head with another punch. Afterward, the Sentinel activated its sunspots again, emitting intense heat to easily melt through a steel door 100 meters thick. With molten lava surrounding it, the Sentinel's head quickly burrowed through, locking onto its target. So the question is, do you think they can escape? Feel free to leave your answer in the comments. She reached out to touch the iron bars, but her entire hand passed straight through, encountering no resistance. Then she leaned her head into the mesh, and in an instant, her whole body was pulled into another world. She saw a spaceship making an emergency landing on Earth. The alien pilot was escorted away by two men in black, taken back to a secured facility. Seeing this scene, she immediately withdrew from the wires, took off her jacket, revealing a black suit underneath. She followed the vehicle all the way to 504 Bailey Street, an older apartment building. She acted calmly like an experienced agent of the Men in Black, even casually greeted the security guard. But as soon as she entered the elevator, the guard sensed something was wrong. He immediately picked up his radio and issued an alert. Just as she thought she had slipped through unnoticed, an agent sharply picked up on her unusual behavior. The elevator quickly descended. She was brought to an interrogation room. The officer briefly reviewed her file and asked why she had broken in. She replied that she wanted to explore the universe, to serve her country, and that she had no family or friends. She simply wished to uncover the secrets of the cosmos. Her profile matched all the criteria, so the officer made an exception, allowing her to join the Men in Black. Her entire identity was erased. From that moment on, she had no name, only the codename X. Because of her investigative instincts and problem-solving skills, she was assigned to the London branch of the Men in Black, where an anomaly had been reported. She set off on her journey to London, but just as she sat down on the train, The entire carriage suddenly transformed. What had been a regular subway car became an advanced high-speed transport, racing through a dedicated tunnel. In under 3 minutes, she crossed half the globe and arrived safely at the London division. Jack ate all the food in the entire country in one go. To thank the people for their kindness, he decided to help them with their work. He cleared a vast area of land in just 2 minutes. Then he effortlessly caught a lot of fish. He shared them with the local tiny inhabitants. These little people were overjoyed. They all invited Jack to stay and live with them. But Jack kept thinking about his missing wife. He went to see the king, hoping the king could help him search for her. The king quickly agreed, but set a condition. Jack had to help them defeat the enemies on a nearby island. To find his wife, Jack had no choice but to accept the request. Then Jack set off in a small boat. Soon he arrived on another island. To his surprise, there were humans there too. He ran toward them in delight, but it turned out those people were actually puppets. Just then, a massive shadow appeared behind him. Jack turned around. It was a giant twice the height of the earth. Terrified, he immediately turned and fled. He jumped onto his boat hoping to escape, but the giant simply picked up the entire boat, then jogged all the way and delivered Jack to the castle as a birthday gift for the king. Jack grumbled to himself. The old king never said the enemy would be giants, but to his utter surprise, he found his long-lost wife there. Fortunately, these giants didn't harm them. They only stared curiously at the two tiny people. Later, they even built a miniature palace just for them, so they could stay temporarily. The next day, the king invited Jack to play Go, but the Go pieces were bigger than Jack himself. Every move took a lot of effort. Even so, Jack still won. The king was very displeased. He locked Jack in a cage like a bird cage and released a crocodile, intending to make Jack its dinner. The vampire flew towards the woman and bit her neck, but she was wearing a neck guard. The vampire looked at the beautiful woman and they fell in love at first sight. They decided to get married as soon as possible. In the presence of the vampire family, the elder cut their palms, and Jenny's blood immediately attracted the other vampires. They couldn't understand why Jack would fall in love with her, especially because of her blood. Jack held Jenny's hand, and their blood mixed together. They successfully got married. They had a pair of twin half-vampire daughters, and lived in the vampire underground city. 3 years later, Jenny started to miss home. She decided to take the vampire family back to Germany. The vampire daughters experienced sunlight for the first time, though sunscreen protected them from harm. Jack carried the coffin bed to greet the new neighbors. Jenny tried her best to hide their secret, but the neighbors still felt something was off. Jenny and her family made some rules: no flying during the day, and not eating insects in front of others. The vampire sisters put down their fangs and went to enroll at their new school, but soon they were pranked by their classmates. The younger sister was very angry and glared at the boy fiercely, scaring him so much he wet his pants. The younger sister thought her classmates were boring, but a tattooed girl caught her attention. After class, the younger sister greeted her new friend in the vampire way. Meanwhile, the older sister was bullied by her classmates again. John helped her pack her things, and his gentleness made her heart race. John invited her to swim, but when the older sister jumped into the pool, she was horrified to find that the sunscreen had washed off. The woman was suddenly sucked into a mirror. She screamed desperately, asking her friend to hold on to her, but it seemed that someone on the other side of the mirror was also pulling her with great force. That person was incredibly strong. Her friend slowly couldn't hold on any longer and finally let go. In an instant, the woman vanished into the mirror. Her friend Alice stood frozen in place, looking stunned. She tried to place her hand on the mirror. The surface of the mirror rippled like water. Suddenly, a powerful sucking force appeared again. This time it sucked Alice in as well. The two women appeared in a huge palace. A woman flew out of the mirror and landed on the bed. The other woman, however, was directly thrown out of the window. The woman who came out first slowly lifted her head. She was shocked by the scene before her. She realized she was wearing a white medieval-style gown. The dress looked very elegant and formal. She looked around, unable to believe what she was seeing. She had originally been a fashionable modern girl, but now she had become a medieval princess. She grasped the dress and stumbled toward the window. Only then did she realize she was in a fantasy kingdom. She looked down and saw many people wearing ancient clothing, busy with their lives in the streets. It was only then that she realized she had traveled to an entirely unfamiliar world. Suddenly, there was a soft sound. A woman with wings appeared behind her. She said to her, "I am the fairy godmother of the magical kingdom. This is the magical world." Upon hearing this, the woman was completely stunned. She had truly arrived in a place full of magic. The moment the woman turned around, the man, as if foreseeing danger, immediately jumped up and stood in front of her. In that instant, a crew member pulled the trigger, but time suddenly slowed down. The bullet slowly advanced through the air, as if frozen in place. Except for Anna, everyone in the hall stood still. Anna gazed at this unbelievable scene, and slowly walked forward, reaching out to take the bullet from the air. Just as she was about to turn around, she heard a knocking sound coming from the cabinet behind her. She immediately pulled out an iron rod from above, but a calm-looking little boy emerged from inside. The boy didn't answer Anna's question. He simply took her hand and led her out of the dining room. The moment they stepped out the door, time returned to normal. The man and the others were very confused when they saw Anna suddenly disappear. At that moment, a loud alarm sounded on the ship. Almost all the passengers opened their doors, wanting to figure out what had happened. When the alarm stopped, a regular tick-tock sound echoed through the ship. Strangely, most passengers and crew members seemed to be controlled by this sound. They moved as if they had lost consciousness, automatically heading in the same direction. The synchronized footsteps and tick-tock sound intertwined. This phenomenon wasn't limited to the hall. Even passengers in first class and the lower decks experienced the same thing. Guided by that sound, everyone arrived on the deck, climbed over the railing, and jumped directly into the sea. A father watched helplessly as his son jumped, unable to stop him in time. This scene, repeated over and over in different corners of the ship. People on the ship, as if under a spell, one by one jumped into the sea. This shocking scene filled the few remaining conscious passengers with immense fear and astonishment. This robot was injected with human DNA, which caused a large amount of blood to flow through its body, filling every part of it. The cold steel gradually became reddish, as if it contained human blood. It began to experience emotions. Soon after, it unexpectedly came to life. To make it more human-like, the researchers prepared a real human brain and placed it into a mechanical skull, sealing it inside. The transformation process was not yet complete. They placed it into an artificial womb, just like a human fetus. Artificial blood vessels began to grow inside, integrating completely with the brain, granting it the ability to think. As the blood vessels gradually fell away, it had almost become completely human. Its body began to rise slowly, and its head broke through the surface. First, synthetic skin wrapped its body, soaking in liquid, and then it entered the final stage. Its entire body was enveloped in a membrane, making its appearance almost indistinguishable from that of a human. A scientist carefully picked up a scalpel, cutting open the membrane, revealing a flawless human face. But no one knew what would happen next. The real danger was just beginning. Next, the scientist began testing its loyalty, but unexpectedly, it suddenly grabbed the scientist's arm. Fortunately, the robot did not harm him, but instead released its grip. Then the scientist brought in a large spider and placed it into the tube connected to the robot's head. This time, the robot exhibited signs of fear, shaking uncontrollably, which was very similar to a human response. This proved it had human genes. However, the next test astonished the scientists. A scientist disguised as a clown was directly hunted down by the robot. It was at this moment that the scientist realized the robot was ultimately cold-blooded and merciless. In order to eliminate the potential danger, the scientist tied it up, cut open the implanted brain, and removed the human consciousness. Thus, the robot's soul was completely erased, and its consciousness would be forever frozen in ice. This is a very special camera. The woman used it to take a picture of an apple. Then she picked up the apple and took a bite. However, when the photo was displayed, it showed an apple that had already been bitten. The woman was sure that the apple was intact when she took the photo. What was even stranger was that the bite mark in the photo was exactly the same as the spot where she had bitten. Did this mean the camera could predict the future? The girl walked toward the clock on the wall, wanting to see if the camera could predict the future time. The clock showed 12:15, but the time in the photo was 12:20. This meant the camera could show the future 5 minutes ahead. Then the woman picked up the camera and started taking pictures of objects around the house to see how they would change in 5 minutes. But when she took a picture of a flower pot, something strange happened. In the photo, the flower pot mysteriously disappeared, leaving only the base in the image. The more she thought about it, the stranger it seemed. After all, she lived alone. Who could have moved the flower pot in 5 minutes? So she decided to take another picture of the flower pot. Just as she pressed the shutter, the doorbell suddenly rang, and it rang very urgently. She hadn't ordered any food or packages. When she walked to the door to open it, the new photo appeared. In the photo, there was a stranger who picked up the flower pot and threw it at her. This also explained why the flower pot had disappeared in the photo. It turned out that the photo had predicted what was about to happen. The photo's future might indicate the killer was inside the house, or it could mean that the police outside were there to save her. It could even mean that the killer was outside the door. As she hesitated on whether to open the door, everything was still unknown. The person reached out to grab the shelf, but the shelf immediately became very soft, which shocked him greatly. He tried reaching for it again, and to his surprise, he was completely sucked into it. When he regained consciousness, he found himself in a basement filled with many animal specimens and various strange objects which fascinated him. Suddenly, he noticed a stapler on the ground. Just as he was about to pick it up, a pair of shoes suddenly appeared in front of him, scaring him to the point of falling to the ground. Driven by curiosity, he reached out again to investigate. Gradually, a humanoid figure appeared before him, which shocked him. Then he finally made up his mind and stretched out his hand. Suddenly, a fairy appeared in front of him, causing him to nearly lose his sanity from fear. But the fairy didn't speak. It grabbed him and motioned for him to look in that direction. So the person walked over, feeling around with his hands. Eventually, he discovered a corner of a door. Then he kept feeling around for the door's size until he found the doorknob. He wanted to pull the door open, but the door opened by itself. Just as he was astonished, the door fully opened. It turned out that it connected to another space. After he closed the door, it instantly disappeared. Fortunately, this person managed to sneak into the cryogenic chamber thinking he was finally safe. But he had no idea that the alien creature would never let him off easily. It was pressed up against the outside of the cryogenic chamber, carefully searching for any possible cracks, trying to find a gap to enter. However, no matter how hard it tried, the surface of the cryogenic chamber was as smooth as a mirror, with no gaps to break through. This made it extremely angry, unwilling to give up so easily. The next moment, it suddenly grabbed the cryogenic chamber and the sound of the glass breaking echoed through. At that time, the rescue spaceship was preparing to dock with the space station, and the very cabin trapping the monster was the one about to dock. If the space station completed the docking at that moment, the entire plan would fail completely. The communication equipment was no longer working, and the astronauts could only use flashlights to signal a warning. But these weak lights were completely invisible to the creature. In the end, The rescue spaceship successfully docked with the space station. As the space station shook violently, the trapped Jack felt a sense of hope. However, he still didn't know his teammates' plan. Unaware, he actually opened the hatch and the alien monster had followed him inside. The other two teammates rushed to rescue him, but it was already too late. What made the two of them even more desperate was that, in the struggle, Jack activated the self-rescue program, causing the rescue spaceship to begin disconnecting from the space station. The out-of-control spaceship collided with the space station, causing severe damage. The space station completely lost its propulsion, and they would soon fall into Earth, bringing the monster along. This person traveled back to ancient times in 2022. After entering the castle, he looked around and thought he might be shooting a historical drama. Then he saw a beautiful woman in the crowd and decided to approach her for a chat. The woman told him she was the king's servant. While they were talking, the captain of the royal guard walked over. He suddenly grabbed the woman from behind. This person couldn't stand such provocation, so he started to resist. The guard raised his sword and threatened to cut off his tongue, but he thought it was just part of the scene, so he didn't take it seriously. At that moment, a messenger walked over and summoned him to meet the king. He thus escaped trouble. However, this was just the beginning. The king mistook him for a messenger from Normandy, asking him when the duke would arrive and propose. The man still thought he was filming a movie, so he casually made up a date. To his surprise, the king actually believed him. The king ordered his men to escort him to rest. As soon as he went downstairs, he said he needed to go to the restroom. The guards didn't know what that meant, so he pointed to his lower body and they finally understood. When he walked into the outer room and saw the restroom, he almost threw up. He hurriedly ran out and protested, asking for a clean restroom. At that moment, a group of people ran past them and a dwarf told him they were going to execute a rebel. He didn't want to miss the scene, and soon the rebel was dragged to the execution platform. Before dying, the rebel shouted loudly,
Long live our deposed queen! Power to the people!